don't start in Taiwan, right? We tell our founders, hey, Taiwan is a good market, but it's too small. If you're going to spend all of your time building a business, right, in a region, you might as well go to a place where it scales, because you don't want to spend all that time, hit the cap of the market, and then have to do that again in a bigger market.
Think global from day one is at the heart of Ikigai Accelerator. Founded by Huang and Kevin Lin and backed by 886 Studios, Ikigai is investing $100,000 for every startup in its second batch. Their focus? Taiwan's untapped strength in consumer-facing software and the belief that the next breakout company could start here.
Hi, I'm Kai Huang. I'm managing partner of 886 Studios. We're currently focused on the Ikigai Accelerator program. So now I've started 5 companies at this point. So I consider myself a serial entrepreneur. Some of the parallels that I see between my experience starting the company RedOctane, which created the game Guitar Hero. I've had the fortune and misfortune of going through startups, which is an incredibly difficult road, right? It's a roller coaster ride, I always say. It's up and down. And it's that kind of experience that I've had over the multiple companies that I've started that I'm hoping to be able to share with young entrepreneurs here in Taiwan through our accelerator program, Ikigai. Our goal, or one of our goals with 886 Studios and the Ikigai program is really to help elevate the entire Taiwan startup ecosystem, right? How can we work with these young founders? How can we help them build their companies? How can we share what we've learned? How can we help them be successful? And then when they're successful, the hope is that they will in turn give back and share with other new founders here in Taiwan.
This is Wang, a mentor at Ikigai Accelerator. He sold his first startup, Playdom, to Disney for over $500 million, with one core lesson: test what people want before you build it.
Playdom was a social gaming company I started in 2008, and it was building Facebook game and MySpace game back in the day. So I usually invest in consumer-facing stuff, and for a lot of time, for this type of stuff, it's very important to figure out the product market fit. So when I talk to Taiwanese team and Taiwanese engineer, a lot of teams really want to focus on the technology. But I think it's much more important to focus on to see if there's a market for your technology first. And nowadays, with the advance of AI and so on, and with a lot of great engineering talent in Taiwan, most ideas could actually be built. So the risk is not in the technology side, but the risk is that even if you have a great product, maybe there's no one trying it or no one using it. Most ideas can actually be tested very early on. For instance, if you say you want to build some project, maybe you want to build an AI psychologist or something, one thing you could just run an ad for it. Run an ad, say, hey, you already have this psychologist, ask people if they want to install it. And a lot of this could be done even before you start building any of the app. Like you can have an ad, you can have an account creation flow, and at the end, just, hey, I ask them, hey, do they want to talk more? What kind of psychologist, what kind of problem they have? And this would be a great way to test if your consumer-facing app has an audience or not, if there's a product market fit, before you even build anything. And I think more founders should try to use this type of method to just figure out if there is a market. Otherwise, I see a lot of very talented engineers. What ends up happening is that they spend many years building something, and they only to realize, hey, there's no user for this, or maybe this is not what other people want.
Chris brings optimism, but Steve Chen brings perspective. As co-founder of YouTube, he sees Taiwan's startup ecosystem as still a long ways away from maturity.
What I would love to do is to be able to build these bridges between Taiwan, coming from Taiwan to Silicon Valley and going from Silicon Valley back to Taiwan. And so specifically it would be for supporting more of these Taiwanese American founders in Silicon Valley to be able to actually have that experience of knowing what it's like to be in this ecosystem, to be thinking outside of that environment. I encourage also even more of the government officials, whether it's on the NDC, NDF side, from the E-Tree side, from the various ministries that are trying to do this. I think it's important, if you want to try to emulate, to be able to, in some ways recreate in a Silicon Valley ecosystem in Taiwan, you're going to have to understand, you're going to have to get to the root of the issue, the root of the problem, which is why hasn't this been possible in Taiwan and what makes Silicon Valley different? It is the long-term solution, because I think that a lot of people would get offended if I were to say my suggestion for the most promising startups in Taiwan is the first thing is buy a one-way ticket to Silicon Valley. But I think that that's how you get these people trained to be operating in this environment. Enough of them here to be able to work alongside each other, but more importantly, not to be isolated from Silicon Valley. They need to be going to these events. They need to see how the VCs work on Sand Hill Road. They need to see and be in the rooms with doing real pitches, and they need to be doing collaborations and partnerships with Google, right? Like, these are opportunities that are very difficult to do if you're in Taiwan. And I think that this is the sort of the half step to the fuller step, which is when these companies do prosper, when they actually do succeed, they will want to make ties back to Taiwan.
Steve also sees the importance of attracting companies in the semiconductor and hardware markets that have already secured funding.
And that's an area where I think I'm puzzled, because those are the areas where I think the Taiwanese government can do a lot more to help these people bring in. You know, you see Hong Kong doing it, you see Singapore doing it, attracting this talent and to bring them in. The hurdles that the government in Taiwan has for these companies is very, very high. There are so many competitive countries and cities that are competing against Taipei or Taiwan in general. But Taiwan should use it to its advantage. Like, you do have the semiconductor fabs there. You do have a lot of talented software engineers in Taiwan. So I think it is looking at the checkboxes that it has versus the checkboxes it doesn't have to make it an appealing place and an easy process to attract these companies that are especially doing something in the hardware space to open something in Taiwan.
Like Steve, Kai knows Taiwan's strength has long been in hardware. Taiwan knows how to tell a great hardware story. Now Kai wants to help young founders craft software stories as compelling as Taiwan's hardware success.
I think one of the big cultural differences that I've seen between the US, was where I've spent sort of most of my life and most of my working career, and Taiwan, comes in a couple of different areas. One is the startups here in Taiwan haven't focused on software as much traditionally. It's growing, still new and young and nascent, but it's growing. So we're seeing a lot more sort of pure startup, either enterprise, SaaS, consumer software startups now, which is great. But I think it'll take some time to kind of grow that ecosystem. Whereas, Silicon Valley, which is where I've spent most of my life and working career, ton of software startups just doing all kinds of things, right? In fact, they don't like to do anything hardware related there, so it's almost the opposite. But I think that ecosystem is growing. Another cultural difference that I tend to see is really the ability to think about a business and be able to do storytelling. Talk about my business, right? Why is this important? The best founders that I see are great storytellers. And you have to tell a story to your customers, of course, right? You're trying to sell a product. You have to tell a story to your investors, right? Because you're trying to raise money and you got to convince them to give you money. And you're telling a story to employees and people you hire, right? You have to convince them to believe in your vision and your journey, and they want to come along. And so as a founder, you have to constantly be telling a story. And if you can't tell a great story, it becomes very difficult to get customers, to get investors, right? To hire people. And I think part of the nature, the cultural differences that I've seen in Silicon Valley, people are willing to talk big story, right? Crazy story, right? Moonshots, where maybe some people here would say, well, that's a crazy story. I can't tell that story, right? But I think you need to learn how to tell these stories. And that's one of the things we do in the Ikigai Accelerator program is, we're trying to help founders understand, hey, what is the story and how do I tell it? What do I hope in 5 years? Well, I hope Ikigai Accelerator program is expanding. I hope we're working with a lot more teams, right? I hope we're sharing that experience and knowledge with other people. I hope by 5 years from now, that some of the existing early teams have exited in some way, and now their turn to give back into the ecosystem